Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of Weyward by Emilia Hart. This is a book that came out February 2023 from Griffin Press. It's a mainly historical fiction, a little bit contemporary fiction, somewhat of a magical realism. It's got kind of a lot going on here. A poignant, quick-paced, and richly detailed historical fiction, this book would have been perfect if not for the ending, which I will talk about in vague terms, and then at the end, there's going to be a spoiler section where I'm just going to talk about more detail. Overall, though, I still thought it was a fantastic novel. I'd give it 5 stars, it was really, really good. But first of all, what is it about? I am a wayward and wild inside. Should I do it with a British accent? I am a wayward and wild inside. That was awful. Oh, I should cut that out. I'm not going to. 2019, under cover of darkness, Kate flees London for ramshackle Weyward Cottage, inherited from a great aunt she barely remembers. With its tumbling ivy and overgrown garden, the cottage is worlds away from the abusive partner who tormented Kate. But she begins to suspect that her great aunt had a secret, one that lurks in the bones of the cottage, hidden ever since the witch hunts of the 17th century. 1619. Altha is awaiting trial for the murder of a local farmer who was stampeded to death by his herd. As a girl, Altha's mother taught her their magic, a kind not rooted in spellcasting, but in deep knowledge of the natural world. But unusual women have always been deemed dangerous, and the evidence for witchcraft is set out against Altha. She knows it will take all of her powers to maintain her freedom. 1942. As World War II rages, Violet is trapped in her family's grand, crumbling estate. Straitjacketed by societal convention, she longs for the robust education her brother receives, and for her mother, long deceased, who was rumored to have gone mad before her death. The only traces Violet has of her is a locket bearing the initial W and the word Weyward scratched into the baseboard of her bedroom. Weaving together the stories of 3 extraordinary women across 5 centuries, Emilia Hart's Weyward is an enthralling novel of female resilience and the transformative power of the natural world. So I listened to this book on Audible, and it had 3 narrators, one for each of the main characters. I love that audiobooks are getting so robust now. I just think it's fantastic, and I thought that they all did an excellent job. They all had they were all British, but they all had slightly different accents and stuff. It was so good. So if you want an audiobook to listen to that's not very long, and it's really well put together and really well done, this one's great. So I heard about this book all over the place the last year. So for the Reindeer Readathon, one of the prompts was something that's been, put on lists and stuff. So I chose this for that. I had a long drive and then a huge cleanup of my house on the weekend, so I managed to power through it pretty fast. It's also quite short for historical fiction, which is nice, because sometimes you're like, oh, historical fiction. Oh, it's 600 pages, okay? So if you enjoy multi-generational stories, books about women's struggles, especially within the patriarchy, and historical fiction with absorbing detail, you'll really enjoy this. Well, I will admit, stories of women being oppressed, I actually try to avoid, not because I don't care deeply for that, but because honestly I care too much and it's emotionally exhausting. Yet, they are always resonant and important stories to tell, so I was like, this one sounds really good, and I'm gonna do it. And in this story, there are, as you've heard, 3 women from different time periods being oppressed in different ways. Physically, emotionally, socially, mentally, sometimes all of it. The way these 3 aspects were done, a witch trial, a sexually oppressive society, and a domineering father, and an abusive husband, were all essentially the same thing. Men using their power to control women, but their different lives and choices and how to approach this showed how varied and far-reaching patriarchy and misogyny is. Content warnings for the book include sexual violence and domestic abuse, if you probably didn't guess that. Of course, these stories wouldn't be immersive if the characters weren't compelling. All 3 women felt realistic to the core. Why? Because sometimes they make stupid choices, or are naive, or make mistakes. They aren't perfect. They don't act against the time period they exist in, and they are strong in different ways. They are likable, but most of the time they are understandable. Even if you'd make different choices, or you think you would in the situations they're in, you understand why they made theirs, because their characters all are so incredibly detailed. For example, Violet is only 16 and has been living on her estate for her whole life with barely any other people around. She doesn't even know what her period technically is, let alone other stuff related to reproduction and sex. So we have the frustrating privilege of education when we're looking at her situation. Instead of getting mad at her, we feel bad for her because she hasn't been given the tools she could use, she desperately needs to have done things differently or been able to avoid certain circumstances to protect herself. So it's you're like, no, little girl, don't do this. But then you're like, what else would she have done? She doesn't know. In fact, that's one of the themes of the novel, the knowledge. Had Violet or Alpha the knowledge we have today, even just a very rudimentary sex education, or even a mother-woman role model in their lives to pass down knowledge, all the stuff men, at least until very recently, didn't even know women knew or did, such as holding your keys in your fist when you're walking at night, how to handle your period, things like that, what an ovulation is, if they'd had this sort of mentor in their lives, things would have been very different. Kate is a little different because she's modern, and her problem is the fact that she has this guilt from something that happened to her as a child, and then she kind of has never really gotten past it, and that allowed an abusive, manipulative person to kind of take over her life and then, put her in the battered wife mindset where it's very hard to escape. So that, and the fact that she was a modern woman and did have knowledge about this stuff and was still in this situation was also very impactful as well. But I think because she did grow up now, she was able to, find the means to escape. You see it in the blurb. I'm not spoiling anything, that she kind of gets away from the situation. It's also good because, the worst is when you're reading a book and it's just the domestic abuse is just constant. And you're like, I'm like the vicarious trauma. I'm like, please stop. In this one, it just kind of a little bit at the start. It's not very graphic, and then it kind of moves forward. So anyway, I think the fact that she is able to kind of at least escape that situation from the outset, unlike her two relatives who don't have any kind of resources or information, shows that, the more knowledge and the more freedoms women have, the more opportunities they have to get themselves out of bad situations. Tied to this is the, power of choice over reproduction. Of course, to be palatable to a general audience, abortion in books can only be used in extreme circumstances, such as in this book, and the women have to bemoan it, bemoan the choice and all this stuff. Again, though, it would have felt anachronistic for the characters not to get all worked up about that, given the societies they grew up in and the ideas about that at the time. Also, the bemoaning was at a reasonable level. I never got to the point where I was just, holy shit, shut up. I won't get too into it because it'd be spoilers, but anyway, I thought that it was handled well as it could have been. Yeah. Back to the basics of the story. The writing is good. It's very fluid, and it's told in a different style and format for the three sections. The voices feel distinct and different. Even without kind of the audiobook narration, I think it still would have felt that way. The historical accuracy, I didn't notice anything amiss, regarding that. Though really, the stories are very small in the sense that they take place primarily in three very contained locations. Actually, they all kind of take place in the same house, the same cabin. The cast of supporting characters is also very, very small. There's, some other women. There's a couple dudes who are good dudes, and then there's the three bad dudes. There's really maybe 10 characters in the whole book. A lot of the story is the women contemplating stuff or finding things out about their family histories, more so than big events happening. It's very much this happened to this small group. And I really like stories like that. As much as life-changing or world-changing stories are interesting and exciting, ones that focus on, just a small group of people are sometimes very compelling. The way the stories tied into one another was really excellent. They aren't just related by theme and the fact that they're all family members, but their stories follow kind of similar structures, but in different ways. So while it doesn't feel like you're reading the same story 3 times, they are connected. And except for Kate's, Althea's and Violet's, they kind of went in directions I wasn't expecting. Kate's kind of went the way I expected. But it's just the way that they all kind of ran parallel was very interesting. Overall, I can see why the book is so popular and well rated. It's very engaging, has emotional heft, is well written, and scratches that historical fiction itch you sometimes get. But I will say, there is a very faint magical realism thread that ran through the book that I found kind of dumb. I'm not very fond of magical realism, though, so it takes a lot for me to like a novel that features it. I'm going to talk more about that in this spoiler section coming up in 20 seconds. But yeah, that was just the one thing about the book that I was kind of about, and that's more of a preference on my part. I think most people probably liked that part of it. So, if you enjoy historical fiction or just want a story with three compelling characters that seems like it'll be heavy but actually isn't that bad, you should totally check this out. And guess who got an arc of Emilia Hart's next book, The Sirens? I did. It's coming out on March 18th, so I'll be reviewing that earlier that month. Yeah, I'm very excited for that because I really liked this. So, thank you for checking out the review. So, if you're sticking around for the spoilers, here they come. If not, thanks for watching. So, along with my dislike of magical realism, I'm not super into witch stories, unless I guess it's like Hocus Pocus or like Agatha All Along, which I absolutely loved. Maybe I just don't like witch books. Anyway, I decided to go for this one because I thought the witch aspect was not going to be used literally. Unfortunately, two of the women use magic in a sense. It's very mild magic. It's more like just communicating with animals mainly to defeat their enemies, which I found took away from the women's power, but also kind of arrived as a sort of deus ex machina on the part of Kate. With Altha, that one I was okay with because she commanded the birds to act, though we really didn't need that to be magic. She could have just trained them or urged them into a frenzy based on her knowledge of animals. But with Kate, at the exact second she needed to learn this witchy power, she discovered it, and then used it to attack Simon. This to me was frustrating because while I know this wasn't the intention at all, it almost felt like the women needed something supernatural to be powerful. I found that the magic kind of took away from their personal power. It gave them some kind of level up that I didn't think they needed, and I think it almost took away from the story in a sense. It would have worked better for me if she'd done something with the insects or the birds to distract Simon or fight him off. Instead, she just walks up to him and lets him like start Anakin Skywalkering her, like she's Padme. Like same situation too. She's super pregnant. Man's choking her. I'm like, what is this? That's a terrible plan, Kate. She should have just stayed in the attic. Like she wouldn't have died if she'd stayed in the attic for a day. Like I don't know. And now that I think of it, Violet tormenting Frederick with the mayflies was magic too, I guess. I mean, I thought she just found a way to naturally have them nest in the hall. The fact that it was like magic, I find kind of silly, and I don't like that. And I think that's the thing I don't really like about magical realism. I probably sound like a pretentious ass when I say this, but it's always so juvenile to me. Like magical realism to me should stick to like middle grade books. That's a hot take. Yeah. Anyway, though, that is a really, really minor thing. It didn't bother me that much. It was just like that one thing I was kind of like at the end, I was like, oh. Anyway, that really was a minor thing. Like, it's not a big deal. Everything else is great. I mean, there was one thing I was curious about, like why Kate continued with her pregnancy when she had no job and she was hiding out from Simon. That seemed odd to me because, like, the reason she could have for keeping it, like, could have been broadened out a bit more because I was really surprised she took that path. The reason is it felt almost like she had to for the book's sake and not for her character's sake because of the magical kind of the firstborn is always a girl in order to pass down the magic thing. Though really, that doesn't make sense either because Kate is not Violet's direct daughter and she got the magic. But also, women have miscarriages all the time, not even knowing they're having them. Like, I had a miscarriage at 14 weeks. I knew about that one. But I had like 6 or 7 heavy periods when I was trying to conceive. Those were definitely miscarriages. They were like, I don't know, 2 weeks late. And even though I took the test, but that test just tests the amount of the hormone in your urine. They're not super accurate if the pregnancy is taken and then you've miscarried it. Like sometimes there's not enough of the hormone present in a urine test to even tell that because I had a ton, as I said, a long time, I guess 6 or 7 like really heavy like dark periods. They were definitely miscarriages. 100% they were miscarriages. So like wouldn't those count? This is why I don't like magical realism because like you can always pick it apart with like reality. Anyway, but again, this is just like a super, super minor thing, just picky about me. I thought this book was super impressive. I really enjoyed it. The fact that it was a debut is amazing. I have really high hopes for the Sirens now because of this. Yeah, so thanks for watching.